G'day, welcome everyone to another episode of The Decision Clinic with me, Paul Gordon, and I'm always excited when it's time for another Decision Clinic because I never know quite who's about to walk through the door, who's got some decision challenge that they're facing. And as I look down at my notes, I'm not sure if this really is true or not. Maybe this is a joke, but it looks like the next person in the Decision Clinic is the legendary Tony Nash, king of Booktopia and entrepreneur, successful businessman. I think this is going to be a great conversation about what makes business decisions work, trade-offs, financial, non-financial, culture. I can only begin to imagine. Tony, welcome to the Decision Clinic. Great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Paul.
Oh, fantastic. So I know some things about you because I've always been a fan of what you've done with Booktopia. In fact, I remember visiting Booktopia a few years ago, but not necessarily everyone listening is going to know. What helps me thinking about decision making is to understand a bit of your journey. Where have you been in the last few years? What have you been up to? And then maybe I'll probably jump in on a few of the key decisions that you've made and what's perhaps driven some of those decisions, so we can perhaps unpack them a bit for the benefit of people listening, what really makes successful decisions.
Look, Booktopia came out of an idea, a side hustle that we came up with. We had a digital marketing business, and it was an opportunity to get into it in 2004. It was a bit of a Hansel and Gretel story where one breadcrumb led to another. There was no pivotal moment where we saw a gap in the market and we thought, oh, this is it. We're going to tackle this. It was literally following one breadcrumb after another. And before we knew it, we had a $2 million online store. And from there, we decided to invest more, commit more. And so from 2004, 2007, 2 million, 2010, we're up to 10 million in revenue. 2014, we're up to 40 million in revenue. 2016, we're up to 80 million. And this was in an industry that people were writing off and saying books are dead. Amazon's going to annihilate you anyway. And we kept on growing. And how come? We just really focused on one question, and that was, what do customers want? And by obsessing about that, meaning we weren't necessarily going for books that were the best sellers or were hot right now. It was like books that were predictable and boring and may have been written a few years ago. Lots of business books that we were selling, and no publishers really wanted to talk about them because they were all into the next big thing. And for us, it was really just about obsessing about those boring and predictable books. And you're talking in business, Who Moved My Cheese, The 1 Minute Manager, Good to Great. There's so many of them. And you stock them because people are going to buy them within the month. That was one of the things that we did. By the beginning of 2020, we're up to 150 million in revenue. And that's when we did our first capital raise of 8 million on an $80 million valuation.
That sounds late for a capital raise. You've gone all that far bootstrapped to that
that's
point.
Right. So everything was funded by our customers, by them buying more and us hiring more people. And so anyway, we got to beginning of 2020, we did this raise, and then 6 weeks later, the pandemic hit. And we literally had to turn off all our marketing, all the digital marketing. We even stopped emails going out to customers because we were up 60 to 70% year on year. And we were holding on for dear life. It was like being on the Sydney to Hobart with the gale behind you and the spinnakers up and you're just hanging in there.
Surfing down the next wave.
So middle of the year, so about 6 months in, we decided to do an IPO, and we did an 11-week IPO and listed.
I imagine that's fast, right? That sounds fast.
That's one of the fastest ever. So December 2020, we listed, and we had a market cap, not 80 million, but 315 million. And we had a good year, finished off well. It had another good financial year. And in the middle of that financial year, at the end of 2021, I told the chairman, I said, I want to step away as the CEO. Christopher Columbus, I'm not the king of Spain. Don't ask me to run the country. I want to expand the empire, which is what my talent is. It took me about 6 months to convince them. And then they decided to do that. And then within 6 weeks, the board fired me. And mainly because I was disgusted with the fact that they were going to hire a $500,000 CEO with base salary with plus super plus bonuses, and the recruitment fee was $350,000. And I said, that's just ridiculous. Why would you want to waste our money on that? But it's a typical board, and now you're talking about a listed board decision. Why did you choose IBM? where they're the biggest and the best, you can't blame us,
No one
right?
got fired while hiring IBM.
Yeah, that's right. There's many of those kind of stories. So they hired a recruitment company that was unnecessarily too big. And then I told them, to be honest, and I said it in a video call, I said to the recruitment agency, I want to punch you guys in the face. Because I've been in recruitment for 14 years before Booktopia.
Okay, right. So there's a history there. You know what it's like on the other side of the call.
I had hired a lot of the senior people because I knew recruitment for Booktopia. So they just went back to the chairman and said, you can't have a founder in a business when you're bringing in a new CEO. So they fired me. And then within 2 months, we got rid of the board. We got a new board. Then the CEO came in. And after 2 months, I said to the new board, I said, he's not the right guy. He was still good. He was from Amazon. He was still good, but he's not the right guy. Why isn't he the right guy? He hasn't asked me one question about anything. How the hell did I build the company? And it was that I just thought, you've got to know what I did. What I didn't realize after that all happened was that not only was I the CEO, but I was also the sales director. I ran and I had built all the algorithms myself. I had written them and got the coding guys to code them. But I knew everything about the macro and micro about running our company. And by removing that, there was no succession planning. The interesting thing about the word succession is that success resides in the word succession. And I never thought about that while I was at Booktopia. And you're talking about 3 years now from when I left Booktopia. To think about that, to think about businesses, sporting teams, political parties, whoever, if you don't have a succession plan, then you're not preparing yourself for future success. And whatever it was, is starting to degrade. The decline and fall of the Roman Empire, it's no different. Wow. So we could go on a lot longer, but there was a lot of highs, a lot of learnings, and then the removal of me from the business. There would have been many factors, but it didn't help.
Goodness. And of course, you should always feel free to say, can't say any talk about that. But so what's your relationship with Booktopia now and how are they doing?
Got no idea, because when they went into administration in the middle of 2024, which is a year ago from when we're doing this podcast, there was 60 companies looking to purchase it. 3 got to the short list. One of them was talking to me about asking lots of questions, and they said, let's have a dinner and catch up in 3 weeks. And that was a year ago, and I haven't heard from them since.
So 3 weeks can stretch to a year or more.
So I don't know how they're doing or what's going on.
Yeah. Again, this helps me understand how your brain works a little bit so that we can extract it for the benefit of our listeners. How do you feel about that? Do you look back with kind of sadness? Do you look back with, thank goodness I'm out of there?
Very neutral, to be honest.
Okay.
And one of the reasons for that, as I talk about, you are not your business. You are not your car. You are not your sporting team. When you're not your business, means that your identity is not overlaid on your business, and was super important. So the way that I operate is that I'm not my kids' academic or sporting successes, it's theirs. When Booktopia won Telstra Business of the Year, or the only company ever to make the AFR Fast 100 8 times, we actually had 15 years straight of 25% compound annual growth rate on our revenue. That was the business doing that. When Booktopia went into administration, it wasn't me going into administration. When it comes to business, it's certainly served me very well to not overlay my identity and my ego onto the company.
Sitting clinically in a studio, having a conversation, going, oh, of course, yes. But the reality of that must be trickier, right? Because, of course, we as humans are set up, and a lot of what we do in decision making is look at how humans operate, how we work, because it's humans that make decisions, and without understanding how humans work, we've got no chance of supporting decision making. Like I said, it's easy in a clinical environment to say, oh, of course, I'm not my business, but when you're in the middle of it and the bright lights are on you and the headlines are go Tony or the headlines are boo Tony or whatever, are there some practical things you do in those moments that have you remember that, no, I'm not my business?
Yeah, there's a few things to consider. First of all, I want to throw back to you for a second. What is the etymology, the origins of the word decision?
So the word decide comes from to kill off. I love that as a question, because one of the things that works is almost trying not to look at it from that point of view. One of the things that has us not want to make a decision is the not being willing to kill off something. If you say, I've got a number of options, the decision comes from killing off some options. As soon as we look at it that way, we're always going to be biased against them, even though they're the really terrible things to do and we know we shouldn't be doing with them. But just saying goodbye to it and saying we decided not to do that can be very tricky for us emotionally.
I'm very pleased because I've asked psychologists, what's the etymology of the word anxiety or anxious? I haven't spoken to all of them, of course, but for some that I've spoken to, they don't know. And the etymology of the word anxious or anxiety is to choke. So when someone is feeling anxious about something and they say, just breathe, just breathe. I really love the origins of words. Yeah. And so therefore the fact that is really good, because I looked it up before I got in here.
No.
I think I knew it already. I think I knew it as to cut off. It's to cut off, to kill off, settle. So that's one part of it, to understand that. And to me, it's almost like to be in a bath, sit in a bath around that etymology or the origins of something, to really understand what that means. So then I have other words that I like to contemplate. The word intuition. Tuition, break it up into two words. In tuition, in training, the tuition fee that you go to do a course or listen to a podcast series or do whatever to learn something, right? And intuition in business is sometimes making decisions and learning from them. Many of them could be right, some of them could be wrong, or learning experiences, and you put that in your gut. And so when things happen, and when you, going back to the origins of your question that you were asking me before, I think about that a lot. I think about what happened and then what did I learn from that?
Right.
I break up a lot of words, but another word, disappointment. How can you have a word like appointment? I had an appointment to do a podcast. I had an appointment to go and catch up with my accountant, which sometimes can be great or not great, but you have a word appointment, which is bland and neutral, and then you put dis in front of it. How can it be so heavy? It's because I had an expectation that something was going to happen and it didn't happen. That idea of that, to be able to grieve on whatever you were expecting and didn't happen the way that you thought, it's all part of it. So getting back to your original thing about what happened with Booktopia, how do you do that? And then how do you build that as a business leader and a business owner? If you're a business owner, you may just be the leader of a business. You need to have that as part of your backpack of gemstones that are there for you to use as tools in your day-to-day living. Otherwise, it's a real roller coaster. And in business, if you're leading, it's like the state of origin, right? Or any sporting event. Where would you prefer to be? Do you want to be on the field playing the game? Do you want to be in the crowd shouting at the ref? Do you want to be the journalist writing about the game? Do you want to be on TV or at home or at the pub watching the game, right? Or do you want to be on the field? I want to be on the field. And if you're going to be on the field, you're going to get hit. It's going to hurt. There's going to be winners and there's going to be learners. That's how it is in business. So you've got to bring all those things together to be able to be present. Let's just say we're on a ship going from Sydney to Auckland, middle of the Tasman Sea, fierce storm. The boat's rolling through 30-meter waves or whatever they get. What do you want the captain to do? Screaming, we're all going to die. Or do you want them at the helm being steadfast, clear? I need you to do this. I need you to do that. You got to do this. You need to be grounded and you need to be centered. So there's a lot of things in there that I've brought up that kind of revolve and resolve themselves around all of the issues that are going on. So decisions are happening quickly, but using your intuition. Yes, you'll have learning experiences. Yes, you're going to get over them. You can't sit there and lament and beat yourself up about it. One of the things that happened when I got fired from the board is that my phone, through SMS, calls, Facebook, LinkedIn, because it hit the media, because we're a listed company, it hit the media. Everyone was ringing me and asking, are you okay? And I'm going, I'm okay. And it was because of all those things. And it made me think about it. It's my choice to be better from this experience than be bitter from it. When we listed on the ASX, my LinkedIn post got 45,000 views. That one about mental health had 170,000 views. Mental health, it's your mental process. When things are happening, how wise, learned, adaptable, grounded, clear, centered are you going to be to deal with that? There's lots of shows on TV where you're watching decision making happening in motion based on their experience.
So there's lots that we can talk about in everything that you said. So thank you, Tony. One thing that comes to mind when you say you are not your business and you can distinguish that also reminds me of much work I've done in the past to distinguish you are not your thoughts and feelings, and the separation of who you are and who you know yourself to be versus the experiences you're having, and how the ability, which is not, that's why I asked the question, because it's easy to go, yes, of course. Oh, yes, I know that. But actually in that moment when the train's coming at you, to not wave your arms around and scream, as opposed to think, actually, I need you to step off the track. In the moment is the hardest thing to do. So it just reminds me of those things. It points me, and I definitely want to unpack the intuition conversation from a decision-making perspective. And because I'm going to part this conversation, but I'm just signposting that we'll have it, which is around that, the role of intuition, gut feeling, and so on in decision making. And often that gets diminished or poo-pooed. It's no, we're all about the data. So there's a conversation about that. But the other conversation is, I like to talk a lot about this buyer's remorse idea, the regret that you have from you've made a decision, you may have felt like we're going down the right path, and then you kind of look back and go, oh, goodness me, and I wish I hadn't. And there's a lot of factors that are at play in that, and that could easily be the way. That's why I asked you the question, particularly about, as you look back in your experience and reflections on that, it could easily be for another human being, not you, but for another human being, that could be a lifetime then, oh, I should have, I wish I had, etc., as opposed to, as I heard you say, being done with it. That was that. I can learn from it. So I count myself as the learner, not the winner, but I can count from that. And probably I would imagine you can frame it in another way and go, actually, I count myself as the winner. Thank goodness I'm not in the moment dealing with where that is right now. Being able to be okay with our decisions, bringing a bit of decision science to the conversation. One of the things that has us regret some of these outcomes is that when we look back and go through that intuition experience of what did I learn or what could I learn from this, it's often we didn't take something into consideration in the decision that kind of we knew was something that mattered to us or mattered to our customer or what the customer really wants. We ignored that, maybe because it was too hard or maybe because we didn't think it should matter. And so we make a decision at the end of it, we're like, how do we get here? And then often the answer is, yeah, that was that thing that was missing. I want to bring it back to your conversation about singular focus. What do our customers want? Because I want to ask you a question about that. Is it what they want or what they need, or is it the combination of both of those things? Or how do you see the distinction between what our customers want and what they need? That was obviously the success driver for Booktopia.
It was always data driven. So stimulus response. In the beginning, we were selling a lot of books with bare-chested men in kilts in the Scottish Highlands on the front cover. Romance. I could see that we were selling a lot of them. We were bringing them in from the States because they weren't available in Australia. And no bookshops stocked them. Why? Because hand on heart, they couldn't say to a customer, oh, these are great books, because they never read romance in a million years, Mills and Boon, all that kind of stuff. So it was almost like, once again, following the breadcrumbs. Oh, there's a bunch of you that really like those. We'll make sure they're available for you. We didn't have them in a warehouse in America, and once you bought them, we'd bring them in. No, we bought them because we knew you were going to buy them.
And you're about to go away for the weekend and you want it tomorrow, not in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, we shortened the delivery time to make sure, because we knew that's what they wanted. It was the same with To Kill a Mockingbird, Who Moved My Cheese, all those classic greats. It was the same thing. So it's a bit of what they want and what they need. When you go into a bookshop and you see all those trestle tables out the front, they're called remainders in the book industry, and they're the overprints that publishers have. Okay. And a $30 book that you're buying for $10, they probably bought them for $3 or $4 or $5 or something, but it gets you in the store. So that's more of what you need more, almost like it's a discount that you can't refuse because the price, the value proposition is very good, but it gets you in and then you buy the other books that are there that are at full price. So it's a mixture of the two. There's 50 to 100 million active books out in the world. Before the internet, it was 500,000 because most of them went out of print. Now things don't need to go out of print. When we were running Booktopia, in the beginning, there was 6 million. So it's massively increased as more and more books are either becoming available, or there's lots of self-published, or there's an AI kind of tool creating something that's completely rubbish. It's an interesting one. I think it's more about what they want. For us, there was so much opportunity in what they want. Even textbooks. Like we just started stocking textbooks. At one point, they were expensive. Bookshops didn't stock them. Online, it was easier, students. And we built that up to about a $50 million part of our business because it was obvious. Taught law, pathophysiology. I got no idea what they are. People wanted them.
And I'm just hearing your example about bare-chested men in kilts. Was there, and I can feel my own bias, and I think this is the case, but I'm actually interested in your view, especially from the data. I'm also thinking about the distinguishing between the people go into a bookstore versus they come online. That classic bricks and mortar versus e-commerce. Was there something about the fact that I could go and buy my bare-chested man in a kilt book from Mills and Boon? No one needs to see me go into a bookstore. I don't need to ask the assistant, can I find the bare-chested man in the kilt? I can just go and do it completely discreetly and anonymously. And when the book turns up, I get to read what I want to read, rather than as I walk through the store and everything that's in my face is, you must read the next book by Elon Musk or whatever. And okay, I better buy that one because that's what's expected of me versus what I really want. Do you think there was something like that that kind of helped the online presence?
That particular nuance in terms of not wanting to go into a store and buy really powered the e-reading part of the market, because you could actually be buying a book and be reading it in seconds rather than waiting for the physical delivery, although many people like the physical book. So it was interesting during the pandemic that even though people were stuck at home and they couldn't even get to bookshops and they could be buying from us, and a lot were, that they didn't default to buying the digital or the audio version. They were buying the physical, not only in Australia, but all around the English-speaking world and non-English-speaking countries. Everyone wanted a physical book because they were spending so much time on their phone, their computer. The last thing they really wanted to do was spend time on another device or on the same device. So there was more of that, I think, in terms of that particular genre of books, the romance, although there's still a lot of physical romance books sold. The demographic, mostly female, of course. That's obvious. Regional as well, not just simply in your cities, but all around the country, people were buying that. I want to go back, if I may, to what we were talking about before and about getting over those decisions, the idea of lamenting decision, which I think is really important. Many years ago, I did a workshop with a guy. I've done a lot of work on myself, personal development, not necessarily courses like uni courses, certifications of that ilk. And I was doing a really odd and weird one 20 odd years ago. And it was with a guy, Aussie Greek guy, had been a Swami in India for 14 years and came back to Australia. And it was 10 weekends on spiritual mastery. It wasn't necessarily my not, but I wanted to explore it and see maybe there was something in there. And it was a very small part of one weekend where he told us a story. And it went like this, that while he was in India, they were going to have a 3-day weekend, Friday to Sunday event, workshop. I think it was like a meditation retreat, something like that. And it was about an hour before the whole thing was going to start on the Friday morning. And word got through that the guy that was running it, his Swami, the great Swami, had died. And 800 people were attending the workshop. What happened was the guy got up out of his chair, went straight to his room and slammed the door. And they're all freaking out because, oh my God, we've got 800 people arriving. What are we going to do? It's a terrible thing. The great Swami has died, right? And what he told us was the guy came out of his room 15 minutes later, completely grieved. So he had learned to grieve without resistance, to feel all the feelings without resistance. And even though it was such a small part of that course, I thought about that a lot. I could see that's a learned skill. So then how can I develop that skill? It's kind of being on a roller coaster and going, those feelings, better versus bitter, right? Those feelings of going down to the bottom, but if you've got the handbrake on because you don't want to get down to feel those feelings, then you're losing all of your momentum. So the truth is you got to put your hands up in the air and you got to allow yourself to feel those feelings, the very depth of what the loss is or what didn't happen or whatever was going on. Then you go up the other side and then you're going to feel them again. And then you're going to feel them again. And if you can work out a way to grieve whatever didn't work out in business, that's a super important skill to have. And I've experienced that in many things. The best one that I can remember because we're very close. We're on Castlereagh Street,
Hmm.
and I worked on Castlereagh Street. I was on Elizabeth Street, and then we moved to Castlereagh. And what happened was, we were on the first floor of a building, a very old building in Elizabeth Street, and we moved to the 27th floor of a very nice new building on Castlereagh Street,
Right.
having got the whole floor of this building, overlooking Sydney Harbour, all around the building. And I got taken up there, and I was the best salesman in the company at that time. And my office was the one looking at the Park Regis, where I could see people getting changed in the morning. And other people were getting offices overlooking Sydney Harbour. So I walked out of the office, I walked out of the building and walked around the city furious. For 3 hours, I was walking around and just so angry and so pissed off. I go back to the office.
Yeah.
I go to the 27th floor, and I ask my boss to come into that room, shut the door, and I look at him and I just burst into tears.
Oh,
I just
man.
started telling him everything, and he listened, and he stood there and he listened. I kept crying, and I was telling him and blah, blah. I don't know how long I went on for, probably 10 minutes or something, maybe longer. And at the end of it, he goes, "Tony, I understand that you're upset, but this is where you're going to be working, in this room." And he walked out. And I'm standing there in a wash of emotion, like really drained, really exhausted. And I look at it, and you remember the movie Ghostbusters? And then Sigourney Weaver lived in an apartment which was like the vortex of some evil, it was that whole building thing.
Yes.
In a similar kind of way, I thought to myself, this is the money center of the building. From a feng shui perspective, they wish they were here. And I completely reframed it.
Yeah.
And I knew, and I just was able to work through it very quickly. And I was hugely successful afterwards being in that room. But the idea of grieving and the idea of getting through it, even though it was difficult that time, and it was certainly clunky and embarrassing and whatever else, but it gave me a lot of it gave me a reference point to realize how important it is to get over stuff.
Yeah, I think you said the word which struck with me was the resistance, the unwillingness to be with the emotion, the putting the handbrake on the way down the roller coaster. And I can hear there was a moment in that the reframe was the switch from the resist, it's not fair, it's not okay, it's going to be terrible being in this room, into actually I've created this as the money center. Everyone else is going to wish they were in this room, and they don't get to because I'm here. Thanks very much. And so you shifted from resistance to almost not even just acceptance, but actually embracing the whole, okay, this is a new world. And that's certainly, just to segue that into the world of decision making, our resistance to even looking at all options. One of the things that a lot of decisions go poorly is because we don't have sufficient options that we're considering. We have one thing in front of us, that's your choice, get on with it. And we're like, okay, I'll do that. And then where our buyer's remorse comes from is we walk down the street and walk past this other thing we didn't consider. And it's like, why didn't I have that option? So there's often a resistance to finding more options, particularly because we're biased towards a particular outcome. We've just had this great call with the best salesman in the company trying to pitch us something. Of course, I need to buy that thing. And so the ability to give ourselves some freedom to look at some alternatives and to be okay and deal with the resistance away from the sort of bias, the status quo, is a real opportunity, but it's a challenge because we notice that, as a great adage I heard is, the more we resist persists, right? The more we keep, I don't want to experience this emotion, I don't want to take this on, then the harder it gets for us to untrench ourselves from that position. And it's always interesting to look at what can cause this to get out of that. Sometimes it's the slap in the face from someone else saying, wake yourself up from this. But I love that example of your Swami, who had become free with no resistance to their emotion, that they could process that in 15 minutes and then no doubt led what was a very successful, empowering, amazing to 800 people, from when they could have had full permission to go, actually we're cancelling the whole thing because this is a day of mourning now.
Grieving ends when it ends, but it doesn't need to go on forever or for a long time. That's important to understand. The other thing to remember is that when emotions are high, intelligence is low. So if you're making decisions, which is what this podcast series is all about, to me, when I think about that, and you spent a lot more time on this than me, so mostly I'm operating from a very automatic place, meaning I know what I know, and I'm coming into this session with what I know. I go into a meeting with what I know, and I'm not trying to sit there and go, how do I do this? I'm not operating at a operational functional level or trying to chunk it down. So first of all, there's the things that happen in our body that are being taken care of, breathing, like eating, whatever else, reproduction, whatever else goes on automatic. Then you have that layer above, which is your conscious thinking, which is that where decisions are happening and they're automatic. And you're not like driving, for example, when we get our L's and our P's and then we drive and then it becomes automatic. As business people, as parents, as coaches in sporting teams, as friends on a holiday together, how is our emotion and our intelligence, how are we operating automatically to be able to be as best available to yourself and to those around you? That's really, really important. And the truth is that what we're talking about today, or what, if anyone listens, or hopefully they do listen to the whole podcast series, that was a great thing, what Tony said, or what the other person said, or what Paul said. But how can I integrate that so it's completely automatic? And there was a story I tell, is maybe this is a good place to finish if we're getting close, is that I was driving out of my old house, reversing out on a Saturday morning, and there's a bit of a steep drive. And as I'm driving out, I look to the left, and in my neighbor's driveway, there's a lady that I didn't recognize looking down at the pavement. I thought, that's a bit odd. So I stopped the car, get out, and there's my neighbor, Bruce, lying on the ground, unconscious with blood coming from his head.
Oh, my goodness.
And what he'd been doing is he'd been hacking out some bamboo up the top near his house, and he did a swoop and rolled 2 meters down onto the next embankment, and then another 2 meters down onto the embankment below and hit his head. Now, where it gets funny but also critical is that I had done the first aid course at Booktopia twice. I have my certificates.
Yeah.
You do the courses. They tell you what to do. You pump the dummy. You do all the things. But in that moment, did I really remember what the hell I was supposed to do? Am I supposed to roll him over? Am I supposed to ask him questions? I couldn't.
Yeah.
Seriously. Thankfully for Bruce, an ophthalmologist and his wife were driving past, going home at the same time. And he got out and he knew what to do. And the best thing I could do was just ring 000 and call for an ambulance. And so if it's not automatic, don't beat yourself up. That's the key for me. It's like, it was okay, I haven't worked on that enough to be able to be valuable in a situation like that. So there's still more work to do. I'm not sitting there going, you idiot, why the hell didn't you? It's like, it is what it is. And that's what it is in business as well. So you've got all the accumulated experience of things working, not working, hiring people, firing people, making sales, losing sales, whatever it is. It's an accumulation of that. And then what is readily available for you automatically that you bring to the game on a daily basis that you can help and be of value. And the more that you can do that, the more you get paid, the more you're valued, the more that you can create and manifest. That's super important.
Yeah, and I think what I heard in that is a really thing for us to leave people with, which is don't beat yourself up, which again, we know in the moment itself is hard to say that. And what can we bring rather than deal to what can't I bring because I can't remember my first aid training or whatever. What else can I bring in this moment? Frankly, if all I can do is a bit of crowd control, or if I can dial, at least I've got a phone, I can dial 000, then that's the contribution that I can be. And I would say one of the things that I do a lot is collaborative decision making. How do you bring people together to make decisions? Is exactly that. You might have the expertise in a particular topic, and that's the thing that you're bringing to this conversation. I might have the 30 years in this sector or this industry that brings that to it. You bring something else. Together between us, we've got all the parts that's going to have us be satisfied with the way that we move forward and give up some of the resistance to wanting to kill off, back to our decide etymology, give up certain things that we don't want to take forward. That is a great place. But before we finish, though, I do want to ask you, because it's a fun question, what would you say is the best decision you've ever made?
The best decision I've ever made wasn't really a decision, was to become a dad, for sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm making this decision right now. You find out a bit later. That's what happened, but definitely. And of course, to ask my wife to marry me, which took a couple of goes at not asking the question, but bringing it up and getting heavy abuse, because she had already been married before. And it's like, and I hadn't. I'd become a father without being married, but it was like, I'm never getting married. And then to have the courage to go, all right, I'm going to ask this question, because I've done a lot of personal development in courses in work, but the biggest program I've ever been on is being a husband.
And as one myself, I can totally resonate with that, Tony.
Yeah.
And it is an interesting example because I'm also a father and a late to life father myself. As you say, often it doesn't occur like it's a decision in that moment. And frankly, it's one of those things that is in many other things and contexts and that influence the outcome of that decision. We don't just get to say, I'm going to have a child tomorrow and there's my child. It doesn't work that way. Is the difference how the decision looks from the other side of it. So the experience of, and one of the things I say, and maybe this is a little off topic, is that there's no positive business case for parenthood because there isn't. It's trying to stack it up in any business terms. It doesn't stack up. Yet when you're through it on the other side of it, you're like, I wouldn't give this up for the world. Yet when you're it and someone else isn't, that conversation is a very odd conversation because it never looks that way when you're not in the world of parenthood. So I think it's always a fascinating place to look at it from a decision-making point of view because you don't have true control of it as an outcome. You don't really know what it's going to feel like until you're through it. When you're through it, then you're there. And of course, it's one of the few decisions in the world that really you don't get to undo, right? That's the,
That's right. Look, I think the main thing, I just turned 62 the other day. When you get to this,
happy birthday.
Thanks. When you get to this phase, it's really about legacy. So what are you leaving behind? Family is one thing. And when I think about it, I talk about you're not your car, you're not your business, etc. You're also not your body, to be honest. Who you are, Tony Nash, Paul Gordon, it's what we leave behind in terms of the impact that we've made. And to me, it's a bit like dropping a stone into a pond, and it's the ripples that go far and wide that you've got no idea. Someone may have listened to this podcast. I had no idea, made a huge impact on them. But that's legacy.
Yeah.
So right now in my life, we did ask before we started the podcast. So today, what I do is I advise other companies in helping them scale, cut costs, do whatever, help make decisions based on what I know. I'm also speaking, which is always a lot of fun. And I've decided to go back into the book industry and I've started another online book business. Why? People ask, what's the decision about?
Yep.
We can leave that for another podcast.
Okay, cool. We'll take up on that. Yeah.
But it is an interesting thing to continue to see the opportunities that aren't being addressed by the rest of the market. And also for me personally, with AI coming on right now, I love to ride the wave.
Yeah.
So what wave is coming through? AI is coming through. In the beginning, we had to build everything. But today, is it possible to use this technology? How can we use it to do this? How can we outsource that? Something that may have taken 10 people 2 years to technically build may only take 2 people 10 weeks to build. And so that's why I'm getting involved now. So it's no retirement. It's just fun and adventure. Thanks for having me on board.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Tony, for being in the Decision Clinic. So much that we can all take away. And good luck with the, I don't think you need luck, right? Good fortune. There we go. Good fortune.
Good decision making and persistence.
Good decision making. I'd love to have you back to hear how that's going. Thanks so much, Tony.
Pleasure.